Stay. Today's top story. A child missing since last night came home this morning. When asked what happened, he said he was making sandcastles with Grandma. Hearing this, his mother immediately took the urn away from him. So, these goblins we've been working on. We have an architectural tradition. We know what their houses look like. We have animal domestications. Keep in mind, these little guys, our goblins, might very well exist alongside and likely be in competition with the standard run-of-the-mill D&D goblins. Or, organized into little tribes and raiding parties and being taken advantage of by anybody bigger than them. But we're going to focus on our goblins. So, what else do we need to make a proper, believable civilization? We want to make them distinct. We could talk about language. We could talk about food. Right now, how about naming conventions? And about who's in charge. Naming a goblin might be a fun thing to try. Just to be different from everybody else, let's say a goblin's first name is their own. Their surname, or their family name, can be their father's first name. Now, this might get complicated over multiple generations, but in the short term, within living memory, you know who their father is, you know what family they're attached to. What about if a goblin woman gets married? Okay. She keeps her father's first name as her middle name and adds her husband's first name as her new family name. So only a married woman in this society will have a middle name. That's a good identifier. As soon as she introduces herself, everyone knows whether or not a woman is married. Alright, so who's in charge? Who makes the decisions for the immediate family, for an extended family, or for the whole settlement? This actually plays into the language I've been working with as an idea for a goblin language. I decided on the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European. It sounds very foreign, slightly guttural, and rather primitive, and very different from other languages. It's a very simplified version of Proto-Indo-European, but that still gave me over 4,000 words to work with. No grammar, no syntax, no sentence structure, just the words themselves, but that doesn't matter for a game. If you want to use it, say so in the comments. I'll see if I can post a link to it or something. Just use whatever sentence structure and layout you want. What's important for figuring out who the boss is, with this language in particular, is there's no word for king. There's a word for a war leader, which is hireg, but there is a word for queen, which is the same word for wife. That word is Gwen. That reminded me of a unique system of government used by the Mohawk, north of where I grew up. Clan mothers. See, in order to have a vote, you have to be a woman with living grandchildren. You have to have a stake in the long-term results of any decisions that are made. In other words, you have to have skin in the game, so to speak. Now, among the Mohawk, the clan mothers decide who the chief is, and he only gets to be chief until they decide to replace him. So he is beholden. He's the big man in charge, but he is beholden to keeping all the grandmas happy with how he does his job. Let's call this ours Gwen system. For our goblins, let's add another layer to it. Whichever one of these grandmothers is the oldest, she is the big boss. She has the final say if there's an argument between them. She is the Gwen with a capital G for the whole village. So the Gwens decide when to plant, what to harvest, who does what job, what kind of work can be done inside or outside, and when bedtime is for everybody. As well as which of the men is in charge of defense, if they're ever attacked. So now we have a whole society built around impressing Grandma with how good you are at your job, and being respectful. So you don't get stuck in the worst jobs. Sounds like a fun place to raise a family. They could also decide whether or not it's okay for any couple to get married, depending on if they're too closely related. They're the grandmothers. They will remember. And remember, it is still a small town, so that might be a problem. Alright, so now that we got that figured out, let's talk about food. The common opinion is that goblins will eat anything, even if it's rotten. What if that's a misunderstanding? How about goblins use fermentation or similar to things like sauerkraut or kimchi to preserve their food? Anybody not acquainted with the practice will assume they're just eating something rotten. I like the idea of our goblins always being a little bit prepper paranoid. They never know if a village might get attacked or if a crop might fail, plus it's not like they have refrigeration. So they tend to preserve everything. Salted or dried meat, pickled foods, fermented foods, maybe their trail rations are something more akin to pemmican instead of hardtack that humans eat. Now, they might not even have grains on the menu at all. How about heavy, hearty root vegetables? Variations on cabbage, lots of roots and tubers. Another common opinion in the canon is that goblins eat a lot of mushrooms. And we can play with that. Let's feed our goblins all kinds of wild mushrooms and fungus. They have the generational experience to be able to just recognize what is and isn't safe to eat at a glance. So other people might see goblins in the distance just pulling fungus off a tree and eating it. I think that's weird. Depending on where our village is, they could have things like cattail roots, if they're near a pond or a swamp, or burdock roots if they're on the edge of a forest. Odd things here and there that other cultures might not recognize as food. Even bushcraft ideas like cambium. It might be seen by outsiders as goblins eat tree bark. With their livestock, as well as meat, they'll have eggs, which can also be preserved through salting or pickling, as well as milk and, for preservation, cheese. Opinions are divided on it, but I actually like goat cheese, and goat milk for that matter. So now we have a reasonable political structure of Grandma said so. We have a robust diet of goat, meat, milk and cheese, chickens, ducks, salted or pickled eggs, on top of any hunting they do. Pickled and fermented vegetables and mushrooms. That keeps them fed. It would likely give the whole village a rather unique aroma. Imagine a town that smells like sauerkraut, goat cheese, pickles, and egg farts. Well, that covers the common opinion why goblins smell bad. As far as building lore for a culture, we haven't touched on religion. Rituals, ceremonies, gods, holy days, funeral rites. I really don't like the goblin gods for Dungeons and Dragons. They never have a really good reason to follow Maglubiat, other than fear. So maybe our goblins should be apostates. Maybe that's why they're so different from the other goblins you might run into. Maybe that's why they're sort of refugees. Maybe they have a specific few ancestors to venerate. Not worship as gods, but to follow as an example of how to live. Maybe they're the original apostates. Those ancestors were the original apostates who led them away from the old ways. Holy days could be celebrating one or all of these ancestors' achievements, or their ideals. As for funeral rites, I'd be more inclined to cremation pyres than to burial. A society like this would have to be very utilitarian, so why waste good ground planting something that won't grow? So, let me know what you think. Give me ideas for how we can keep building on this. Do you want me to start making stat blocks? Should I write up character sheets for one of these little guys? What do you want to see? Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you next time.